All right. In this video, we're going to talk about something called the Todaro migration model. And the purpose of this model is they were trying to explain it seems that it's hard for when people migrate from rural to urban areas in some countries. It seems it's hard for them to find formal jobs. So they often end up in situations that seem like they're as bad or worse than their situation in the rural areas. And also the housing, for example, urban slums, and other things may seem to be worse than what they had in the rural areas. And so there's a little bit of puzzle of, well, why would somebody migrate to a city only to end up unemployed, or probably in more reality, working in a very, very, very low paid job in the informal sector, like walking around the city attempting to sell small items or something like this. Okay, so it's saying, this is trying to say, well, why would that be logical for somebody to try to do it? So what they said, well, people are sort of looking at moving to the urban area as kind of like buying a lottery ticket. Okay, and so we're gonna define some terms, and then we'll use this. So let's suppose the wage in the urban area is something. So this is the wage in the urban area. Just to make it simple, I'm gonna make this $10 a day. Okay, so wage in the urban area is $10 a day, but it's not guaranteed that you're going to get one of these good jobs. Okay, so it's not guaranteed you're going to get one of these good jobs. So the probability that you can, this is the probability you get an urban sector job. Okay, so urban sector job, you can think of it as a formal job, like working for a company of some sort. Let's say there's a 60% chance that you can get one of these jobs. Okay, so 60% chance you get one of these jobs, and 40% chance you don't. If you don't, you end up unemployed, or probably doing some kind of economic activity that you can just barely survive at. Okay, so what about if you were to work in the rural sector? So if you're working in the rural sector, there you knew what you had, so there's no we don't need to use a probability there. So the wage in the rural sector, let's suppose, is $2 a day. Okay, but we're just going to use this symbol. Okay, this is your wage you're getting in the rural sector, and then we're going to also have something else, which is this is the cost of migrating. Okay, so this can be financial, psychic, etc. So it might be, so this could be psychic for leaving your family and being far away, or it could be also, it also could be direct costs, like, how much does it cost to get a bus ticket and to invest in the time to do this job search. Okay, so what we're going to say is, well, the rational person is going to compare the expectations on the two sides. Okay, so the rational person is going to say, well, what's the chance I get an urban job times how much do I get paid if I get it? And they're going to compare that to what's my wage in the rural area and how much, so that's your opportunity cost, plus how much does it cost me to move? Okay, how much is it going to cost me to move? Maybe I'm going to have to borrow money, and also maybe it's going to be really lonely and afraid. And the idea is, well, if somebody is rational, then if the expected, so this is your expected wage in the urban, the probability times the wage. So if my expected wage in the urban area is higher than what I'm making in the rural area and what it will cost me to move, then it would be rational. If I'm not very risk averse, it would be rational to take this chance. Okay, to take this chance. And let's take a look given the numbers that we proposed. So let's suppose it was, just to see how this works, if there was a 60% chance I get the urban job and I make $10 a day, then my expected wage is $6 per day. Okay, so there's a 60% chance I get $10 a day, and there's a 40% chance I get nothing. Or we could put something, but it's something less than $2 a day. Okay, but for this, I'm just going to assume you end up unemployed with nothing. And on the other side, if this is greater than $2 a day plus your psychic cost, and I'm sure it probably is, then your decision here is going to be to migrate. Okay, so I'm sure those costs are not equivalent to $4 a day, the difference. So in this case, this person is going to migrate. So they might migrate, and it's a rational decision for them to migrate, but they could also end up unemployed when they get there, right? If they're not one of the lucky 60% who gets this formal job and they end up out of it. Now, it's not totally random. We're going to talk, I'll talk in the written part of the text about who migrates and who doesn't. So it's not totally random, but still this gives you the idea. So knowing this, so if this model, if it has some truth, then how can, and let's suppose you're concerned that your urban areas are growing too fast. You're growing so fast that you can't keep up with it. You can't build infrastructure, and you can't accommodate everybody in a way. So like standards of sanitation and overcrowding and pollution are rising faster than you can deal with them. What could you possibly do? Okay. So this brings us, you can use this model to look at these things. So, well, how would you mitigate some of the problems that might come up? And so I'm only going to talk about a few of them. So how to slow down migration. Well, let's look at this using this model. Okay, just using this model, not using in general. So let's look at this idea. Well, let's take the first idea. What if we create more urban jobs? What will happen? So basically, if you create more urban jobs, well, then the probability that you can find an urban job goes up, right? That makes you more likely to find an urban job if you come. So that means this side, the left-hand side, is getting bigger, right? So what's that going to be? So this raises your expectations are better. They've improved expectations. So this is going to create more migration. Okay, so if there's a better chance to find a job when you get there, more people are going to want to migrate. Right? So if their goal is to discourage migration, then putting a lot of money into developing urban employment, it may end up having a kind of reverse effect than they expect. So yes, the people who get the jobs will benefit and their lives will be better, but more people will come, and more people might come to the extent that the urban poor population actually grows. Okay, so the urban middle class grows, but the urban poor may grow faster. And that's because this attraction will be stronger as things improve there. Another would be urban minimum wage. Okay, so if you have an urban minimum wage, what would that do? Well, forgetting so this means the wage is going to go up. Okay, so if we hold the probability constant, it may not be constant because having a minimum wage may make it harder to find jobs. But your expectation is going up, and this one could also lead to increased migration, because if you're buying a lottery ticket and now the lottery ticket is more valuable, right? So moving to a city is like buying a lottery ticket for the rural poor. At least that's the idea of this model. And so if you make the lottery ticket more valuable, then people are more likely they want to buy it. Okay, buying being the analogy. Okay. I'm not necessarily advocating this model as an end, the final answer on how to do urban planning by any means. I'm just saying I'm just trying to tell you what it predicts. And the next one, well, if you have public work projects to clean up, to improve urban slums. Okay, so you have urban slums without sanitation, without running water, without functioning toilets, everything else. So this is a big concern. But so what do you think will happen to migration if you do projects to make the slums nicer, put in running water, toilets, etc., etc., etc. So this would tend to lower the cost of migration, right? So it makes it less unpleasant, and not exactly cost of migration. It makes it less unpleasant if fail to get the good job. Okay. So this would actually also, this model would predict that would also lead to more migration. Although this one's a little bit different than the top two, because it would lead to more migration, but if assuming the government had the resources, it would also might lead to improved living conditions in the urban area in general. But if the new arrivals were too many, it may lead to the creation of new slums that were just as bad as the original ones in terms of the conditions that people were living in. So what this model would point towards, and this is something that had a big influence on the Chinese government at one point, and on lots of other governments in their sort of national development strategies, is what they should focus on is rural employment and ag development. So not just agriculture, but also rural industry too. Okay, so if they're worried about urbanization happening too fast and cities growing too fast in a way that they can't handle, then the most logical way to deal with this would be to make things better in the rural area. So what that would do is that is going to raise the wages in the rural areas and raise the opportunities in the rural areas. And so this would slow, if it worked, okay, that's a big if, but if it worked, this should slow down migration. Okay, so it's kind of counterintuitive in a way. This model tells us because on the face it looks like people are doing something irrational, but it shows us clearly they're not. But it also then says, well, actually, to slow this down, if you try to improve things in the city, it won't slow it down. In fact, your investment in the city may not be able to keep up. But if you try to improve things in the rural areas, then it might slow down this migration. Okay. So anyways, that's the gist of the Todaro migration model.